Stiltskin. Once there was a poor miller who had a very beautiful daughter. One day, he went to the king's court and claimed that his daughter could spin straw into gold. The king ordered the miller's daughter to come to the palace. He took her to a room full of straw and said to her, "You must spin all this straw into gold tonight, or you shall die." The miller's daughter was locked in the room alone. She did not know what to do and began to cry. Suddenly, a dwarf came out of nowhere and asked her,
"Why are you crying?"
When she told him the story, he said,
"Don't worry, I'll spin the straw into gold, but what will you give me in return?"
"I will give you my necklace," she promised. The dwarf spun all the straw into gold. The next day, when the king saw this, he was astonished and pleased. He became greedier. He took the girl to a bigger room and said, "Spin all this straw into gold, or you shall die." She was locked inside again, and once again, she began to cry. The tiny man came into the room once more. He said,
"If I spin all the straw into gold, what will you give me this time?"
She gave him her gold ring, and he sat through the night and spun all the straw into gold. The third morning, the king was very happy to see the room full of gold. He took her to the biggest room filled with straw and said, "If you spin all this straw into gold, you shall become my wife." The girl was locked up, and once again, she began to cry. This time, when the little man came to her, she said, "I don't have anything to give you, sir. What will I do?" He said,
"Promise me that you will give me your firstborn child when you become the queen."
The girl agreed to do so because she was not expecting to become the king's wife. The tiny man spun all the straw into gold in the night. The next day, the king was pleased to see the gold. He married the girl, and soon they had a baby. The tiny man came to the queen to take her baby away, but she had forgotten about the promise. She cried and begged him to leave her baby alone. The tiny man said,
"I will not take your baby if you can guess my name. I'll give you 3 days.
Saying this, he disappeared. The queen tried to remember all kinds of names. The next night when he came, she told him all the uncommon names that she could think of.
Let's see. Perhaps your name is Timothy, Benjamin, or Jeremiah.
But he always answered,
"That is not my name."
The next day, the queen sent her servants all over the country to get all the possible names of the people. That night, the dwarf came to the queen again, but she could not guess his real name. On the third day, one of the queen's servants went into the forest to find the little man. Deep in the woods, the servant found him dancing and singing happily in front of a fire. He sang,
"Today I bake, tomorrow I brew, the next I'll have the young queen's child. Ha ha! Glad am I that no one knew that Rumpelstiltskin I am styled."
The servant went back to the palace and told the queen the name of the dwarf. That night, when the little man came to the queen, she was already prepared. The tiny man challenged,
"Do you give up? Shall I take your child away?"
The queen smiled and replied,
Is your name Harry? Is it Conrad? Perhaps it is Rumpelstiltskin.
Hearing his name, the tiny man screamed,
How could you possibly know my name?
Saying this, he ran away deep into the forest, never to be seen again. The Princess and the Pea. A long time ago, in a land far away, there lived a king and queen who had just one son. The prince was grown up, and it was time for him to marry a princess. And she must be a real princess, the prince told the king and queen. But there were no princesses in the land where he lived, so the king and queen arranged for the prince to travel to strange and distant lands to find a bride. The prince traveled north through frozen lands until he came to a castle where a princess lived. This princess was tall and fair and very clever, but she was also vain and boastful. A real princess would not be boastful, thought the prince. So he traveled south through hot, sandy deserts until he came to a palace where a princess lived. This princess was very beautiful, but also very proud. A real princess would not be so proud, thought the prince. So he traveled east through misty lands until he came to a mansion where a princess lived. This princess had a charming smile and a lovely voice, but she told the most shocking lies. A real princess would never tell lies, thought the prince. So he returned home from his travels, weary, sad, and lonely. One evening, not long after the prince had come home, a terrible storm blew in from the west. Suddenly, there was a knock at the palace door. The king was so surprised that he went to answer it himself. There, standing in the windy doorway, was the most bedraggled young woman the king had ever seen. "Good evening, Your Majesty," she said to the king, curtsying politely. "I am a princess and I need shelter for the night. May I please come in?" "Of course," said the king. "We will gladly give you shelter for the night." When the king told the prince that a princess had turned up at the door, the prince was very eager to meet her. But the queen told him he would have to wait. "The princess said that she couldn't possibly meet you wet and bedraggled," the queen explained. "She has gone to have a bath and change into some dry clothes." "That's a good sign," said the prince. "But how can we be certain that she is a real princess?" "I have an idea," said his mother. "Leave everything to me." A short while later, the princess arrived in the main hall dressed in the queen's clothes. Her hair shone, her cheeks were rosy, and her eyes sparkled merrily to match her smile. The prince and princess sat beside the fire and talked for hours. The prince was enchanted, but he still wasn't sure that the princess was a real princess. Meanwhile, the queen went to the best guest bedroom carrying a single tiny dried pea. In the bedroom, she put the pea under the mattress. Then she asked a servant to bring another mattress to put on top of the first, and then another mattress, and another, until there were 20 mattresses on the bed. Then the queen told the servant to put 20 soft, cozy quilts on top of the mattresses and had a ladder brought for the princess. The princess was surprised when the queen brought her to the bedroom with its towering bed and ladder, but she didn't protest or complain. She thanked the queen and wished her good night. The princess climbed the ladder to the very top of the bed. Sighing contentedly, she settled down to sleep. But the princess did not sleep a wink. She tossed and turned all night. By morning, the princess felt tired and weary. When she came down to breakfast, the prince, the king, and the queen greeted her eagerly. "Did you sleep well?" asked the queen. "I'm afraid not," sighed the princess. "There was something small and hard in the bed, and no matter which way I turned, I still felt it. Oh, I'm dreadfully tired, for I hardly slept at all." "I'm so sorry," said the queen. "But I'm delighted too, for this proves that you are indeed a real princess. Only a real princess would feel a tiny pea under 20 mattresses and 20 quilts." The prince was overjoyed, for he had already fallen in love with the princess, and she had fallen in love with him. And so they were married. And what happened to the pea? It was put on a velvet cushion in a glass case and sent to the museum, where it's still on display today.
Do you wish to see load of stories here? Then please subscribe this channel. Along with your friends and family, enjoy all the videos of Magicbox. Magicbox English, a place to learn lot of good things with happiness. Don't forget to subscribe.